That's why I'm signing today an executive order to supercharge our administration's ambitious plan to confront the existential threat of climate change. It is an existential threat.
Well, they sure say it a lot. They all got the same memo. So is global warming really an existential threat? And then, of course, you've got surging sea levels about to inundate our coasts. Or are hurricanes and tornadoes really becoming fiercer and more frequent? Is climate change really going to destroy our economy? Really? Let's bring in one of the best experts in the field, Steve Koonin, former Undersecretary for Science at the Department of Energy under President Obama. He is now director of the Center for Urban Science and Progress at New York University. He is a former theoretical physics professor at Caltech. His new book is Unsettled: What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters. And I'm going to fess up here. He is also my mentor on the issue of climate change. I've been following him for years, and he visited with me several times in the White House. Steve Koonin, welcome to the show. So I just got to ask you right at the top, sea levels, global warming, destroying the economy, hurricanes. Is all this stuff really true?
Well, Larry, every time I hear somebody talk about an existential threat from a changing climate, I'm reminded of a line from the classic movie The Princess Bride. You keep using that word, the science, but I don't think that word means what you think it means. And in fact, discussions of existential threat, climate crisis, climate disaster are really at odds with what the official science says in reports that are issued by the UN and the U.S. government.
Tell us more, Steve, because this is it. You heard all those sounds, quotes from Biden and Yellen and all the government leaders, existential threat. Tell us why not.
Well, there are some things you read in the reports. First of all, I think everybody agrees that the globe has warmed about a degree from 1900 until the present, and that warming is due to some combination of human influences and natural influences. But beyond that, almost no severe weather event shows any detectable trend. There are no long-term trends in droughts or floods around the globe, in severe weather events like thunderstorms. Sea level is rising at the spectacular rate of 1 foot per century and was doing it at about the same rate 80 years ago. In the U.S., record high temperatures are no more frequent than they were in the 1900s. I can go on and on. No detectable human influences on hurricanes. This is not Steve talking. This is what's in those reports, often explicitly, but sometimes a little bit obscured, and you got to read closely to find it.
So, actually, I want you to go on and on. I'll give you 45 or 50 minutes on the show because this is so important.
Good.
I mean, look, so all these people, they got the memo, existential threat. You're saying factually it's not true. What's interesting here, you just mentioned global warming is partly man-made and partly natural causes. Now, I've read this because I followed you so closely, and we've talked about it. What are some of abolishing fossil fuels may not be the answer. What are the natural causes, for example, that they're not talking about?
So one that we understand actually pretty well is the volcanic eruptions. When a volcano goes off, it's a big one. It puts some aerosols, dust into the stratosphere. That lasts for a couple years and cools the globe by about 0.5 degree over a couple years. And we know that. We kind of understand it. But there are long-term cycles in the climate system that we have a very poor understanding of. And if we watch one part of the cycle over the last 30 years, we can be fooled because in the distant past, it was actually going down instead of up, for example. And the models that we use do a pretty poor job of reproducing those cycles.
Did you say 1/2 degree in the last 100 years?
We went up by 1 degree in the last 100 years.
So that's what this is all about?
And what's interesting about that, when you look at the record, is it's not a steady increase. It warmed pretty rapidly from 1910 to 1940, actually cooled a little bit from 1940 to 1970, 75, and then has been warming again rapidly from about 1980 to the present. So even as human influences have increased steadily during that time, the warming has not at all been steady, which tells you that there are other things happening.
All right. Let's explore the other things when we come back with you. We're going to keep you for another segment. And how is the forecasting game in this climate change issue? And what should we be doing? We'll be back. More from Steve Koonin in just a minute. Professor Koonin, stay with us. This is Kudlow. We're debunking a lot of myths here by somebody who is in the know. Okay, we're back with physicist Steve Koonin, formerly of the Obama Energy Department, professor of physics at Caltech, now with NYU. He is my mentor on the issue of climate change, and he's got a hot new book out, coming out, I think, in mid-April. So, first of all, Steve Koonin, how's the forecasting? You know, this doom and gloom game is all predicated on forecasts for the next, 90 or 100 years. How are those forecasters doing?
Well, you know, it's a really tough business because human influences and other influences are physically small. They're like about 1%. And untangling all of that from the natural variability is difficult. Nevertheless, people build large computer models that take months to run, and they try to project what's going to happen with the climate over the next 80 years, let's say, under different assumptions about greenhouse gas emissions, aerosols, and so on. However, some of the predictions are kind of surprising, right? And the one that may be of most interest, since yours is a business show, is what the economic impact of warming is. And if you read the official reports put out by the UN and the U.S. government, they say that a warming of 3 or more degrees, let's say 4 degrees, by the end of this century will have a minimal impact on either the U.S. or the global economy.
Really?
About 3 to 5%, which is equivalent to 2 to 3 years worth of growth, 70 years from now. All right? So, you know, when I understood that, I was shocked. Okay? And that's why I think anybody who's talking about existential threat, climate crisis, disaster, probably hasn't read the reports.
I mean, you got the Treasury Secretary, who is a pedigreed, distinguished economist, Federal Reserve Board, and so forth and so on. She's out there saying it. And you're saying it ain't true. And she ought to know that, too.
It's not, right. It's not I saying it ain't true. It's what the official science says, the gold standard that everybody looks to.
So,
and I can only conclude that people have been somehow misinformed.
Oh, all right. Either that or just uninformed. Maybe they just don't do the reading. So, Steve Koonin, going after fossil fuels, right? Ending carbon emissions, oil, natural gas, coal, for example, methane in the next 4 or 5 years, and then a tougher regulation by 2030 and 2035. Is that the answer?
I think rapid and major changes in the energy system are just not going to fly. Energy is too embedded throughout society to make changes by tooth extraction. I think instead we need to be thinking about orthodontia if you want to change the system.
Okay.
Let
me, I like that. That's very good. Yeah, I haven't heard that one before. So the book's coming out in a couple of weeks. By way of solutions, you don't have to reveal the whole book because I want people to buy it. But what are some of your thinking on constructive solutions, let's say?
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to do is keep improving the science, okay? And you might say that's self-serving. After all, the guy's a scientist. But we really need to understand the climate system better, what it's doing and what it might do as we go into the next many decades. The second thing is we need to get better at communicating the science. We've not done a very good job at all, and I've given you some examples of surprises that people will find when they really understand the science. I think after that, we need to have a real debate, because this is not just about the science. It's also about values. How much risk are we willing to take? How we balance economic development against the environment, intergenerational equity. I mean, I have kids. I'm just about to have my first grandkid, and I care as much about them as anybody. But, you know, there's a whole big world out there as well. There are 3 billion people without adequate energy. We've got to get them energy somehow
Right.
so that they can improve their lives. So it's not just about what the science says, but we need to mix in a thoughtful way the scientific discussion together with the societal values.
And to ask these questions, you don't have to be a climate denier. You're just asking important questions and raising scientific facts. You know, chap Bjorn Lomborg, I don't know if you know him or not, his argument is, and also former Energy Secretary Dan Brouillette, we need a large portfolio of energy sources. We shouldn't be cutting back. We should have a lot of power to power the economy in the next 100 years. And they both argue for private sector and maybe some government R&D on advanced technology and innovation to help us get through this. Your thought?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I helped, in fact, I led the writing of the first energy technology strategy for the Department of Energy back in 2011. And I think the government has an important role to play in pre-competitive technology development, advanced solar. Clearly, I think we need to be able to improve the electrical grid independent of what we do about greenhouse gas emissions. It's stuck in the 19th century, and we should have a 21st century grid. I also am a fan of small modular reactors.
Right.
You know, wind and solar only produce electricity when the wind blows or the sun shines. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we need electricity all the time. And so you have to have what's called base load. And right now, we have no ways other than nuclear or gas in order to provide that base load.
This is exactly what former Energy Secretary Brouillette said. Base load and nuclear has got to play a big role. And it is getting smaller and cheaper, but we got to help it along. Actually, I've heard Bill Gates talk in the same very similar terms, all right? And he's trying to fund technology, although he's, by his own admission, hasn't had much luck. Mr. Koonin, what about, finally, natural gas? Clean-burning fuel, very popular. I think it's up to maybe 40% of our U.S. power. I'd hate to see us ban natural gas, sir. Your thought?
Oh, absolutely not. We should not be doing that at all, at least for the next many decades. Natural gas is domestic. It's clean, as you mentioned. We have plenty of it, so much that we're beginning to export it. I think it's an energy, and it's flexible. You can turn it on and off on, a few minutes' notice in terms of generation. And so we need to keep using natural gas. It's cheap enough that it's squeezing out coal on economic grounds, and we should let the market do that if that's what it wants to do.
All right, terrific stuff. Illuminating, Mr. Koonin. That's physicist Steve Koonin, folks. He's got a new book coming out soon. One click on Amazon is my hunch. Professor, I hope you come back many times. Thank you very, very much.
Be happy to.
Thank
All
you,
right,
sir.
okay.
All right, up next.